locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Rasslin.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
This is Brian Atomic, the most destructive, the most aggressive, the most explosive wrestler in the scene right now. And you are listening to Duke Loves Rasslin.
Brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. Year 8 of the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, I am not holding back, okay? I am bringing on the best, the brightest. Not only are we talking Hall of Famers, not only are we talking about wonderful people who are on TV today making it happen, but also the future of the entire pro wrestling industry. And certainly our next guest here is somebody that I know is just going to continue to be a name that you will never forget. So without further ado, welcome to the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, Brian Atomic. How you doing there, Atomic?
Doing good, Duke. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. Listen, I have seen you dismantle some of the most promising stars in all of independent wrestling today. I got to ask you, man, what is up with your aggression? Because it's terrifying.
What do you expect when you see Brian Atomic? I'm the most destructive force in wrestling. I am the most aggressive person out there.
Well, you certainly are. And listen, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. Legitimately, I'm a fan of your work, man. But I wonder, though, pro wrestling is a sport, and it just seems like there are times where you kind of cross the line there, Brian Atomic, where it seems like you're more interested in hurting people as opposed to winning the match.
I'm going to beat you into an inch of your life. If you're not ready for that, don't step inside the ring with me. It's plain and simple.
Okay, so let me just move on from that because, folks, this dude's a little intense. And listen, first and foremost, respect to you. I know that you are one of the many wonderful students of our friend Leigh, and he is without a doubt one of the most intimidating people in the history of pro wrestling. Is this why you bring this type of energy to matches yourself here, because you come from someone who legitimately puts fear in the hearts of everyone when he steps in the ring?
Well, let's get one thing straight. This is something that's always been inside Brian Atomic. He just helped me bring it out a little bit more. And now that it's out, there's no way that it's going back in. Everybody better beware. Everybody better be scared, because Brian Atomic isn't coming here to play.
Okay, well, listen, man. Again, I don't want any problems, bro. I hear you. I believe you. I've seen it happen. You're in great shape too, man. I mean, in 2024, what can I do? What can Duke Loves Rasslin do in order to get in the type of incredible shape that a guy like Brian Atomic is in today?
Well, first, you want to get off the couch and actually start exercising. Maybe go on a run. Maybe do some push-ups, some sit-ups. That's a great start for you. But I'm not expecting much out of you, so don't worry about it.
Wow. Okay. Well, there it is. Now, I know that you've been popping up in WWN recently here, and certainly the best and the brightest go through that whole territory. I still call it territories there. Talk to me about WWN.
Well, it's been like about a year-long hiatus since I've been in WWN Proving Ground. I was the ACW Cruiserweight Champion. As soon as I lost it, it looks like that belt went away. But, it's to be expected. Nobody can withhold the privilege and the prestige that Brian Atomic had when that belt was in my possession. So now that I'm back in WWN Proving Ground, you could expect me to be back on the top, main eventing every single show there, because the main event is where Brian Atomic should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Certainly. And I hear that you're going to be making an appearance at the River City Wrestling Con. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
So what can fans expect when they see you there?
Oh, you can expect destruction. You can expect mayhem. You can expect that my opponents will look like they just went through an atomic bomb, dismantled.
Wow. Okay. This guy is he is on message. There's no two ways about it. Let me ask you something that's a little offbeat for a second here, because I got to cut through this tension. I feel like you're about to take my lunch money, and I really need to eat my lunch today. So let me ask you this: when it's time to refuel, and you're having a meal, I know I asked Low Key this question, and he surprised me by telling me that he loves pizza, and he has a special type of pizza that he gets with pineapple on it and all kinds of other sweet and savory things going on. So what about Brian Atomic? When it's time for you to refuel, when it's time for you to get some nourishment there, what's your favorite meal and why?
Well, one thing you should know about Brian Atomic is that he loves French fries. Okay, I consider myself a French fry connoisseur. If you don't have good French fries, then I feel like you just can't cook anything good.
Oh, okay. Now, do you actually make French fries yourself, Brian Atomic? Because listen, I know how to make some fries. I could 3 times fry at different temperatures to get it extra crispy. I think that's the Korean style, would have you. I know how to do a little something with a potato here. What about Brian Atomic? Can you make fries yourself?
Look, Brian Atomic is a master with the potatoes, okay? Any potato, mashed potato, baked potato, French fry, waffle fries, steak fries, I got it all.
And he will give you a couple of potatoes if you're standing in the ring with him. That is the Brian Atomic way, folks.
I will smack you with a potato, guys. I will smack
boy.
you with a potato.
Okay, this guy is intense. Well, if anyone listening right now is interested in following you on your journey, because certainly you're leaving a wake of broken bodies as you continue to climb the mountain, so to speak, of the entire pro wrestling world, what's the best way that folks can keep up with Brian Atomic?
You can follow me on Instagram at @TheBrianAtomic. I got an X. It's Brian Atomic as well. And same thing with Facebook, Brian Atomic. And Duke, if you ever want to make it another 5, another 8, another 10 years in wrestling, make sure you never disrespect Brian Atomic. Do I make myself clear?
Strictly for the culture. Brothers and sisters, you have seen the t-shirts, the hats, the hoodies, the mugs in the hands of some of your favorite pro wrestling stars, podcasters, and influencers out there. And now it's time. Visit strictlyfortheculture.ca and you too can be part of the movement. Bigger than sweatshirts and commercial success, Strictly for the Culture aims to build with like-minded people and elevate their position in the world through knowledge, self-love, and a desire to unite. So what are you waiting on? Visit strictlyfortheculture.ca. Do it for the love. Do it for the knowledge. Most importantly, folks, do it strictly for the culture. Brothers and sisters, the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast is international. And certainly, we started the first episode of this show that I did an interview on was with Adrian out in Middle Kingdom Wrestling, which is in China. The guy was all the way in China, and he did my first ever interview on Duke Loves Rasslin. So we started international, and here we are celebrating our 8th year anniversary, and we're going to continue to be international because aside from talking to wrestling promoters and all of these great wrestlers from around the world, I really love talking to great fans as well, because the perspective is just so interesting, especially when you can get somebody who is from somewhere else. So, one of my favorite people in all of the wrestling community is a lady who's out in England, and she's just so cool. She's passionate about pro wrestling. She's knowledgeable. But more importantly, she's a really, really great person. And I'm just very happy to have her on this show because she's been on one of my other shows before. So without further ado, welcome to Duke Loves Rasslin, Stella. How you doing this, Stella?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to talk about WrestleMania with you.
That's right. And listen, let's get to the most important stuff here. I'm the guy with the Boston accent. You're the lady with the English accent. So let's talk about the accent thing for a second here. Um, do you realize you have an accent? Like, is that a thing that you're conscious of?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Because there are so many accents in the UK. You can do like a 30-minute drive and there's a different accent. So because I moved from my hometown, I stick out like a sore thumb where I live now. So I'm
So
very
does this become a
conscious.
problem where they're like, "Where are you from?" Where it's just, talk to me about that.
Kind of at first. I've lived here for about 7 years now. So at first, I didn't know that I had an accent, and I also didn't know that phrases I was using they didn't know down here. But I figured it out now, and I can speak to them. I don't feel like an alien.
I love that. I love that. Listen, again, I'm a Boston guy, and we don't really sound like people anywhere else. I mean, really, the New England area. When you start getting real deep up in the north of the Northeast, the accent changes, and it's totally different from New York and even Rhode Island. You know, they're very different, even though they're right next to us. So I sympathize with you very much about the accent thing. I didn't know I had one until somebody pointed it out. Then it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's just the way it is. So
Yeah.
you're a lifelong wrestling fan, right?
Not lifelong, but most of my life. I started watching when I was 11 years old, and I'm 24, nearly 25 now.
Wow.
So a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. I mean, goodness gracious. So how many people have you put wrestling holds on? You can tell me. It's safe now since you're a grown woman now. You can admit what you did back then. So were you putting guys in headlocks and stuff like that?
Sometimes. I mean, I started watching wrestling before my little brother was born. So when he was born, then I had someone to sort of practice them on. We do still wrestle a little bit now. Now that he's
Well,
bigger.
I was going to say he's bigger now, so he can actually put some holds on you back.
Yeah, and he's quite strong actually. So it's a more of a fair fight now.
Now you're tall though, right? Aren't you tall? Like you're taller than most of the girls around, right?
Yeah, I'm about 6 foot. So pretty tall.
Wow. So why are you not wrestling? I think you could challenge, Charlotte Flair right now. I think that would be pretty awesome.
The reason that I can't wrestle is because I'm so clumsy and not athletically gifted at all.
Listen, that was John Cena's problem too, but yet look at the career he's had. So there's still hope for you, Stella.
True. Maybe
There
I'll
is.
go find a wrestling school, give it a go.
If you were to become a wrestler, what would be your gimmick? I mean, what would be like the real thing that Stella would be like, yeah, this is me?
Oh my God, I don't know. Because when I was younger, I sort of envisioned my gimmick, and that's what Rhea Ripley is now. So she kind of stole that from me, to be honest.
See that? Rhea Ripley, just so you know, you're in big trouble. Okay? Stella is coming for you. You can't just go around with the tattoos and being mommy and all that stuff. It's not fair. Stella did it first. So
It's
there
not.
it is.
I'm coming for the World Championship next
That's
WrestleMania.
right. Next WrestleMania. Listen, we got to bring it to England. You know what I mean?
Oh,
We can do it.
do.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
That'd
Bring it
be
to England
amazing.
and then really see who the baddest woman in the UK is. Why not? I love
I'm
that.
down.
So speaking of WrestleMania, we just had it, and WrestleMania 40. It was a big spectacle. It was without a doubt the most watched WrestleMania of all time, and in fact, Peacock Channel, which I think is only in the United States. So this is just in the United States. They put out a statistic stating that 1.2 billion hours of WrestleMania content was consumed over Saturday and Sunday. What do you think when you hear those kind of numbers?
That's insane, to be honest.
Right?
I mean, well, it's crazy because it feels like WWE now is almost bigger than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime, you know? And with the rise of social media, I guess it is more accessible, but it just goes to show how big WrestleMania 40 was. And I think those numbers are actually deserved.
So you're into the stuff that they're doing right now.
I
That's
love
awesome.
it. I think it's the most excited I've been about wrestling in a long time.
Now, you and I, we've had some great conversations through the years about life and our philosophies on things. And I know one of the things that always stood out to me about you is the fact that you maintain a diverse circle around you, a diverse circle of friends and people that you care about and what have you, and you love culture. How much of that factors into your feelings about the current WWE product? Because certainly, I think it's from a cultural standpoint, it's more diverse than it's ever been, right?
You know what? I would agree, and it is really great to see. And it's nice as well when you think about even things like three black women having such a great showing at WrestleMania and the aura that they have. It makes me happy that children and other people will get to see themselves sort of represented in WWE, and I think that's amazing in of itself. And it showing all the different, like the Lucha Libre style we saw at WrestleMania 2, which was a lot of fun. I think all round it is very diverse, and it's just great to see all these different styles of wrestling and these people that come from different cultures getting that representation. It's great.
Absolutely, absolutely, and certainly there is one wrestler in particular that I know is someone that you have a lot of time for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to spoil it, so I'm going to have you say their name and really explain what is it about this wrestler that you love so much.
Which one? There are a few that I love so much.
Well, unfortunately, he lost his Intercontinental Championship.
Okay. Gunther.
Yeah, that guy. Are you telling me that there's
That
somebody
guy.
bigger than that guy to you?
Well, I have to tell you that to me, Gunther and Cody Rhodes are pretty level at the moment for me.
Oh, okay. So we're going to table Cody for a second. We're going to table the American Nightmare for a second, because I thought for sure that if Ginny ever allowed it to happen, that Gunther would be you would be like his other wife or something here. So we got to talk about this. What is it about Gunther that has just captured your interest and made you so passionate about him?
There's a few things. His style of wrestling, just raw brutality. I love it. I've seen, tweets somewhere where it's like Gunther doesn't even really have one finisher. He just beats the crap out of somebody until they just cannot get back up, which I love. And his character, where he's heel, but he's not always stooping to these really low tactics. He's sort of a I don't know what the word is, like courageous heel, respectful heel, where he sort of respects his opponents, he respects the ring, he respects the championship. He doesn't need interference, and he just goes out there and gives it his all, and just has a lot of respect for what he does. I kind of just love that about him, and I love how dominant he's been. I just think he's awesome.
He's a guy that had a lot of weight on him for years. I mean, he was a heavyset guy, and he was challenged by the WWE to once and for all drop the extra pounds and get himself into the best shape of his life. They told him, we believe that you can make it to the next level, but we need you to get in better shape. And, through the years, so many people have been spoken to in that manner. The Big Show, Mark Henry, Yokozuna, Keith Lee. In fact, Keith Lee was told the same exact thing at the same time that Gunther was told. Unfortunately, a lot of those guys that I mentioned, they did not adhere to the directive, at least not at first. And it slowed down their careers to a certain degree. But Gunther, to his credit, he absolutely dedicated himself to getting in the gym, getting himself in the best shape of his life, and really just focusing on being the best version of himself that he could possibly be. For you personally to see the transformation in him from that regard, how do you feel about that?
I thought it was incredible, to be honest, because there was a couple years there where I didn't actually watch too much WWE, and I remember seeing him, when he was like NXT UK and he was a bigger guy, and then to come back and see him on the main roster in the shape that he was in, I thought it was incredible. And it's a lot of hard work and determination, and clearly it's paying off for him, because not only does he, I think he performs quite a bit better, but he seems more confident in himself as well. So I don't know, maybe that has something to do with his performance increasing as well. Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, goodness gracious, he's dressing in all these fancy suits and he's posting these thirst trap pictures with his shirt off and all this other stuff. Like, this guy, and look, he's married to one of the most beautiful women on the planet, in Ginny, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's awesome. I mean, that's, I don't know if you and Ginny can coexist together, or if you have to have a Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania or what have you there, but it's clear that he fancies himself a UK woman himself. So that's pretty awesome. So there's hope, at least. I don't know there. Now, maybe that's right. We don't know what the future will hold. Now, on the flip side, there is a guy who has never shied away from an opportunity to break down into tears.
Mm-hmm.
He is a guy who left the WWE and he took a sledgehammer to the throne of Triple H. And when it was time to welcome him back into the company, Triple H recruited his old nemesis, The Rock, to take a belt and give him a proper thrashing, as my friends in the UK would say.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, he's persevered, and he has become the biggest name in pro wrestling today. And he is someone that has caught your eye as well. We're talking about the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. So this is interesting. You have a lot of time for him as well. What is it about Cody Rhodes that you like so much?
Well, I've got to take it back to 2011 here, because Cody Rhodes is the reason that I started watching WWE when I was 11 years old. I was at my dad's house, and he had turned on the TV. He'd left to go cook food or something, and he just left a random channel on, and it was Friday Night SmackDown, funnily enough. And I saw this handsome guy with this weird mask on his face, and he was handing out paper bags to the crowd and telling them how, revolting and horrible they were. And I was like, this is good. This is really entertaining. And from that moment, I was hooked on WWE, all because of Cody Rhodes. And he was my favourite for years and years and years. And up until the Stardust stuff, I wasn't huge on that. And now seeing him come back, when I knew all those years ago that he had all this potential to be great, and he just wasn't being given the opportunities, to see where he is now, it's amazing. And I have to admit that when he won the WWE Championship, I cried a lot.
Well, you hear that, fellas? All you have to do is get some brown paper bags and tell people they're revolting, and you may catch the eye of Stella. So just keep that in mind there. But don't wear face paint, because that might ruin it. Anyway, yeah. Yes, tears of joy seeing Cody win the championship. Finally finished that story. And what's interesting, and this is something that really touched my heart personally, his family was involved. His wife, his mother, his stepfather, his brother, his sister, like the whole family was involved. They were there for it. His friends in wrestling, even Ricky Starks and folks who are still over in AEW. Cody is very giving of himself and his moment. He wanted to share it with his loved ones. What do you think about that? Just the fact that the guy is so loving in that regard. I mean, I guess that's the word I could use there. What do you think of that concept?
Well, I think it's amazing. Again, it sort of it goes to show why he is the face of the company now, because he's all about family. He's very relatable, down to earth, sort of guy next door type of person. And I thought it was great that he had his family involved, because obviously a lot of his win was for his father. So it was just a really beautiful moment to see. I think Brody Lee's son was also in the ring, and I thought that was really sweet as well. He's just got a lot of time for other people, and that's a big part of why he is one of my favourite wrestlers.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I had a young lady on the show who, her father, Danny G, he's a friend, and he comes on the show multiple times a year, talk wrestling. But his daughter, who's in middle school, she spoke about the fact that Cody Rhodes, and just, being a fan of his and following the way that he treats others and what have you, has helped her battle her depression, and really has kind of pulled her out of that, and make her, enjoy life again. That was actually the phrase that she used, which I thought was just so powerful, because wow, when pro wrestling is at its best, that's what it can do. It can literally save lives. And on a personal note, it's absolutely saved my life. Because I've had pro wrestling, it's kept me from getting into any serious trouble, and it's kept me focused on doing the right thing in order to be able to go and watch wrestling. Like that's the carrot for me. You know what I mean? If you want to watch wrestling, you got to get your homework done, you got to get your chores done, you got to stay out of trouble, you got to be home on time, that sort of thing. Especially when I was a young person, that really kind of kept me out of trouble inadvertently. So to hear other people express similar sentiments, and to hear the joy, and even you saying that, to watch a guy that you first discovered when you were 11 years old, to see him today finally win the championship, the big one, the biggest championship in the history of pro wrestling, at the biggest time in the history of pro wrestling, that made you cry. That's awesome. That's perfect. That's perfect. Looking ahead, I know we mentioned Rhea Ripley. What do you expect from the women's division in WWE?
Well, it is pretty stacked at the moment, so I'm expecting big things. I think that Mommy is going to be on top for a while. Do you know as well who I can see being a big player very soon is Tiffany Stratton? I could maybe see her going after Bayley soon. I wouldn't be surprised if Jade Cargill is in the title picture as well. There's so many great players in the women's division that it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest. But I know that I'm very excited. I'm also very excited about the return of Charlotte Flair when that happens. Just a lot going on, a lot of good things.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And like you said, it's such a stacked roster. You don't know what's going to happen next, but there are so many people who could be at the top. And that's what is so great about it. And everyone that you just mentioned is different. Again, the diversity, different backgrounds. They're coming from different walks of life. They have their own stories to tell. And because of that, they're bringing different fans into the mix who can all come together for this great thing that we call pro wrestling. So it's pretty awesome. Over in the UK, I mean, do you get enough? That WWE goes over there about once or twice a year, or is that enough for you there?
Probably. I mean, I'm actually really, I'm really upset actually, because they're coming to the UK next week and I can't make it. I would really like to go and see Cody as champion, but I just don't think it's possible. So hopefully they'll be coming back later in the year, and hopefully he'll still be champion by then, so I can see. I want another pay-per-view though. I didn't make it to Money in the Bank last year, so I want another pay-per-view. SummerSlam, hopefully. That'd be good.
Okay, Triple H, you hear that? Stella wants another pay-per-view. She needs the belt to stay on Cody. When he comes back to the UK, we got to make this happen, okay? So do not, and in the words of Cody Rhodes' father, The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Don't let me down. Okay, there you go. That's my Cody Rhodes. That's my Dusty Rhodes impersonation. You got it there. Listen, Stella. Again, you're one of my favorite people in all of the pro wrestling fandom. You're just a very well thought of person. You are always clear in what you communicate, and you never miss a chance to educate, which is really cool. And I don't even think you realize it, but that's exactly what happens because your attention to detail and the things that matter to you, the way that you express it is like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, let me look at it from that point of view as well. So it's always fun to hear from you. Anyone listening out there, if they want to follow along, especially on the X or Twitter or whatever the hell Elon Musk is going to call it tomorrow, what's the best way that they can keep up with Stella?
So my username on X or Twitter is Edge-O-Matics, like one of Edge's signature moves. So follow me on there. I love to talk wrestling, give my unwarranted opinions on things. So go ahead, I'll follow back.
Okay, you hear that, folks? She'll follow back. But just don't be weird because Stella doesn't have time for that, and she'll powerbomb you. She's 6 feet tall. She can get it done. And also, we got to talk about Greg's. Okay, when am I going to get a sausage roll? Because it's kind of ridiculous that we've been friends for a couple of years now, and you have never ever sent me any Greg's. What's going on here?
Well, by the time it gets to you, it would be bad. You need to come here and experience Greg's firsthand when it's warm and it's fresh and it's perfect. There's nothing like it.
I want to remind you to check out Zencastr, Zencastr. That is my favorite program to use for all my recording needs. And the great part is, not only do they have audio, but they also have video options as well. So whether you're video conferencing, podcasting, just catching up with friends and loved ones, you definitely want to check out Zencastr. They have paid subscriptions. They also have a free version, which I'm actually using right now. Transcripts, the whole 9 yards, and even, get this, Zencastr has started to do hosting. So for all you podcasters out there, if you're looking for a host for your show, please consider Zencastr. You will not regret it. I'm telling you right now. Once again, Zencastr. Made on Zencastr. That's right. All right, we're rocking and rolling. Once again, the 8th year anniversary episode of the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast. And of course, I had to reach out to my good cousin from up north on the heels of his WrestleMania trip. Decided to come back and give us an update on all the goings on in the city of brotherly love. So without further ado, Leigh Bursey, welcome back to Duke Loves Rasslin. How you doing, brother?
Man, I really love that I'm a cousin from up north. It's like we're like Dudleyville here. I dig this.
That's exactly it.
I'm doing good. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I dig it. That's cool. No, I had a great time. Things were definitely. It was pretty magical, if I'm being honest. As a spectator, it was quite something to take in, and a lot to unpack there.
Well, I want to get right to the heart of the most important question on everybody's mind, because this is a thing in the United States of America, and I'm sure it's a thing up in Canada as well. And, I'm just going to be straight with you, Leigh. Our friends over in Philadelphia, they have something called a Philly cheesesteak. It is a steak sandwich with cheese on top, and, they're very proud of it. That's literally the official sandwich of Philadelphia. But here in Boston, we have steak and cheese subs, right? We use real cheese. We don't use Cheese Whiz. Our steak is a higher quality, I believe, and we pepper it up and all that good stuff there. So, this is like a rivalry, so to speak. And I've discussed this on the show for the past 8 years straight. Steak and cheese subs are better than Philly cheesesteaks. So I don't know if you ever had a steak and cheese sub, but I want to get your take on the Philly cheesesteak. Were you able to partake in the official Philadelphia sandwich?
Oh, yeah, for sure I was. I'm a fat kid. It's like my goal. That's why I went. I got to be honest. I've not had the Boston version of this, the
Steak and cheese sub.
Steak and cheese steak sandwich, but I have had various steak and cheese like sandwiches from various chain restaurants that have an international franchise appeal, I suppose. I mean, I know Subway and the Quiznos of the world and Mr. Subs all do that as well. I look forward to trying it, but I feel like you kind of undercut the quality of what I did have. Because, yeah, you're right. There are certain places where you can get the cheese whiz, but actually they are famously known for provolone cheese. And they also use peppers. I think I had, I'm going to say 6 of them over the time I was there.
Jesus.
Yeah, I wanted to try as many different ones as I could. So they had one that was like pizza flavored, and then they had another one. And it's easy for me to have 6 of anything because my wife was with me. And, she'll try something and be like, okay, you can have the rest. I don't want the rest. And I'm like, you know what? That's what I'm here for. That's why I married you. So hand me the cheesesteak. So I would say it was a delicacy. It was just very much that perfect urban man food for when you've had too much to drink. There's too many $12 beers to enjoy at the arena. They're all warm. Nothing was quite as satisfying in my stomach as a cheesesteak.
So
I missed them.
So
already,
was there a particular place where you felt that they did it the best?
My wife has opinions on that, maybe more than I do. She mentioned a couple of them, actually. Of course, I knew when my wife made a cameo in the background that my dog would go off.
The tavern we went to in Essington.
But there was a tavern in Essington that had the best cheesesteak, and it had no, reputation for it. It was actually a seafood restaurant, but they just did it really well. And everyone talks about Geno's or Luke's, and I mean, like the franchises, they all do their thing, and they do it well. But ultimately, there's a difference between... I think there was a great argument about professional wrestling about this a few years ago, right? When Seth Rollins was talking about how he's part of the biggest company, and therefore they're the best company, and every other wrestler chimed in with talking about how, like, WWE is the Big Mac of the wrestling industry. I think there's a comparable argument here. You had places like Geno's and Luke's, which made great food. The arena, there's really enjoyable sandwich. It filled a hole, especially when you're freezing goddamn cold in the middle of night one of WrestleMania. But, I mean, if you're looking for something that makes you go, oh, that's the stuff, that you wouldn't find that at the arena.
Very interesting. So we got to go to the taverns in Philadelphia where they actually know how to put real cheese on their sandwiches. They still call it a cheesesteak, which is unfortunate. It's actually a steak and cheese sub. It's not a cheesesteak. I don't care what anybody says. But I do trust your wife. I trust your wife more than you, which is, she decided to marry you, so she's a good decision maker, Leigh. So if she says that the tavern is the way to go, then that's what we're going with. So there it is. Shout out to Leigh's wife. Okay. She knows what she's talking about. That's right.
My wife just got a shout out on wrestling podcast. The irony of that.
I just put her over, brother. I don't know if that scores you any points at all, but I just put her over.
We'll see. We'll see what point.
She's an international star now. That's it. Although the angry Philadelphians, that I might have just transferred the heat that I had on me onto her, but that's another story for another day. That's right.
Any heat would be welcome after that wrestling.
Oh boy, I love that. Listen, what's this about you flirting with Mama Rhodes? I saw some photos, and she had a gleam in her eye, and you looked a little too cozy over there, Leigh. So let's get the skinny here. Were you making googly eyes at Mama Rhodes?
I mean, $20 is $20, right? The truth is, if I'm being honest, is she was the most adorable little lady I've ever met in my life, and she was so welcoming. And I have a very special Cody story, right? And I think I actually asked you to help me signal boost it a while back. My grandmother died of Huntington's disease. My mother struggles with it now. I was lucky enough not to inherit that gene. But we struggled a lot with a lot of different pieces. There's a lot of mental health issues that exist in my family, a lot of substance use issues, a lot of things that are not so positive about my family's past. And, we mentioned in the last episode, I've lived in tents. I've struggled with different pieces and fought for mental health and talked about homelessness prevention and harm reduction. Well, one thing I'll say about my grandmother, Margaret, she may have been a lot of things to a lot of different people, some good, some not so good. But for me, she was a huge piece of my adolescence. And I told that story last time, I think, that really... I know Vince Russo reacted to when you shared it and hit home about learning to read, by reading that old WWF magazine. It was her who was buying it. You know, it was her who was the inception. She was Leo in this story, and I was just, you know, a willing muse at a young age. And I say wrestling has never felt the same on Monday nights without my grandmother. I've never seen someone get so intense and passionate about a product other than myself. And when in the last couple of years of her illness, I was trying my best to fulfill as much of those wish list items as I could. My favorites were Bret Hart and The Undertaker. Okay, great. We're going to go meet Bret Hart and The Undertaker no matter what it takes. And we did. And, you know, I got her with pictures with Billy Gunn and pictures with Mark Henry. Shout out to, you know, those guys in Kingston, Chinlock Dudes, Jen Murphy and stuff. They did some really cool stuff, and they still are. And all of a sudden, she's backstage with Tommy Dreamer. All of a sudden, she's meeting the Shockmaster. And, you know, it's cute. It's fun. It made me feel really good. And, you know, I got to share that story with Billy Gunn the other day, too. You know, he was pretty touched by it. He's like, you know, I don't get a lot of those stories, but they're always feel-good things. Well, whatever the case, the last wrestler she ever met was Cody Rhodes. And it was a cancer fundraiser by a great group out of Ottawa. And I remember that there was a bunch of talent there. MJF was there. He was so in character. He was obnoxious to such a point that it was almost too much, man. You know, he called her wheels when she was in her wheelchair and refused to take a picture with her. And I'm like, you know what? Kayfabe may be a little too far with you, kid. You know, I've warmed up to him since, but I wanted to smack him in his mouth. I guess maybe that was the goal. But, you know, at the same time, I kind of would have liked to have that picture with my grandmother, especially now. So if you're listening, Maxwell, you're a fucking prick. Anyway, moving on from that, she was too sick. Man, that day was a bad day. And we didn't make it to opening bell. We had to leave. And it was sad because she felt terrible on the way home. Like, she'd cheat me out of an experience. But when she met Cody Rhodes, she actually stood up out of her wheelchair. And he made her feel like $1 million. And I don't think I saw a bigger smile on her face in weeks, let alone on the day when she felt awful and her body was falling apart. And he talked about it, how he had a sister named Margaret, too. So I wanted to share that with Mama Rhodes. I saw the opportunity, and I couldn't help myself. And that's probably why she gave me that really close hug, because I think it impacted her, too. Now, like I said, wrestling is a love story, man.
Wow. Well, definitely shout out to Grandma Margaret. And Cody Rhodes' sister, Teal Margaret, who she's my favorite Rhodes, by the way. Definitely shout out to Mama Rhodes. And you know something, Cody, I got all these folks coming on the show, putting you over. You know, you and I, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but Cody Rhodes is a good guy. Shout out to him. It's amazing. It is truly amazing to hear people from all over the world are coming on the show and sharing what Cody Rhodes means to them. And I can only just really appreciate that, because that lets me know that pro wrestling fandom is in a good place. So that's good stuff there, Leigh.
Well said. Well said, and I appreciate you saying that. You know, he's not my favorite wrestler of all time. I won't even pretend. He doesn't make my top 20. That doesn't change the fact that, I can't boo him now. I'll never have a moment where I'll be not interested and not kind of pulling for him. And a lot of it is because he made my grandmother smile when she was dying. You know, and that's the magic of wrestling.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And shame on MJF. Listen, I have a take on him, and I know that we're talking WrestleMania here, but just as an aside, I think there's a fine line where the gimmick is too much, and
Agreed.
MJF goes out of his way to he jumps out of character at times where it's like, all right, maybe this isn't the time for you to jump out of character. And he stays in character at times when it's like, buddy, that's enough. Somebody has to mentor that kid and let him know the difference, because I got to imagine he's costing himself money by carrying on and taking things too far most of the time, especially in those situations.
Agreed. I think this is where the mentorship of like a Jim Cornette would have actually helped with someone like MJF, because they definitely share a lot in terms of their views of the business. You know, but you know, the truth is not only was I more than happy to pay for the photo, and now that's money that's not in his pocket today. But on top of that, I've seen the videos where he's writing like slut or something really just unnecessary on somebody's action figure or photo. And I think to myself, okay, there's a distinct difference between being a classic heel and living your character. The Undertaker was in character for 30 years. Ric Flair's been his character his whole life. I'm not criticizing that concept, but you got to remember where your bread is butter, and that is that you insult the audience that tunes into your program, and then you wonder why your ratings are low. This is why the Miz's success in places that MJF just isn't yet.
Wow,
Right.
well said. Well said. And shout out to the Miz. I mean, you talk about just a professional. I mean, literally, the Miz is a professional wrestler and a professional just in life. I really got a lot of respect and admiration for that guy just because he does it right. That's a great comparison you made there. The do's and the don'ts, so to speak, in the business there. So generally speaking, for somebody who has never been to WrestleMania, if they were to ask you, hey, Leigh, what are like 2 or 3 tips that you can give me that would make my experience better than what it would be if I didn't do these things?
I don't know if I'm that qualified, but I'll do my best. I got to attend WrestleMania twice in my life. The first time I cried like a baby because I never thought I'd see those moments. And the first image that came up on the screen was Shawn Michaels' boyhood dream, and it made me all nostalgic for those magazines and those stories that I was just sharing. And I think that's a daily part of my life, that nostalgia. But it was also the longest goddamn WrestleMania of all time, and that was 15, or what? No, sorry, not 15, rather. It was 5 years ago. It was at MetLife Stadium, 35, and it was, of course, the last one. That was a 1-night event. And the reason why, not only did they steal this concept from Wrestle Kingdom, which works because Wrestle Kingdom was famous for having a qualifying event in the main event of night 1, and then having their IWGP champion defending against who earned that opportunity in night 2. Very similar to what we saw this year for the first time. But on top of that, not only does it give more people an opportunity to have those main event moments, maybe we wouldn't have had a pissed off CM Punk walking out of the company if John Cena, who was the main eventer 10 years ago, could have had night 2, and maybe Punk could have been the star of night 1. And, there's a guy who had a 400-plus day championship reign and never headlined a main event unless it was against John Cena. Perfect example. So the night 2 thing made sense. Turning into 2 evenings was fun. But it was also, a lot of the fact is there were people who were missing the train home during the match between Becky, Ronda, and Charlotte. It started after midnight because the card was so packed and people wanted to be on the show because it's a big deal. We're seeing a difference in the way that the air is done now, and now Hunter is a little more cognizant of the fact that if you want to be on the WrestleMania show, you're going to have to earn it. And if you're not, and you should be, we're going to make sure that you are there next year. Shout out to, as an example, Liv Morgan. She wasn't on this year's Mania, but she's already inserted into a pretty prominent storyline right now that I think is going to pay dividends to her character. So maybe it made sense at that moment. And the same can be said for Chad Gable. They both had huge coming out parties on Monday night, and neither were on this year's WrestleMania. I think Hunter understands to some degree. Paul's going, we're going to have to shorten this show and make it a little more comfortable. And that's probably, that pageantry is such a huge key part of this, larger-than-life spectacle. But I would say it sometimes could be a detractor if you're a wrestling fan as opposed to just a WWE fan. So I think you need to be prepared for some degree to be sitting there and watching video packages. You need to dress appropriately. One thing about Philadelphia is it's bloody cold first week of April. That first night, a lot of people were complaining that it was a dead crowd. Well, we were frozen. You could have had Bane and Mr. Freeze in the dark match, and it would have made sense. So I would say dressing appropriately is number 1. Number 2 is, I got to say, Philadelphia pretty lax when it comes to smoking in and around their stadium arena. If there was an open space, we saw a lot of people who were in smoking areas, but they weren't designated smoking areas. And I was talking to a guy from Baltimore who's like, this would just not happen where I come from. So if you're about to sit down for 2 6-hour events and, you're feeling for tobacco or something else, you might need to plan ahead for those type of environments. Number 3 would be sometimes it is worth going to the merchandise store that they have ahead of time. Like they have that whole merchandise store, multiple merchandise stores in and around the arena ahead of the event. And if you're waiting until a slow moment in the pay-per-view, the true story is these PLEs are sort of high energy, and there's sort of always something going on. But on top of that, there's also just so many goddamn people that it doesn't matter when or a high or low moment is. There's 1,000 people in line, period. So be prepared to miss those magical moments because you didn't show up an hour early for your T-shirt. I think that being organized that way makes a significant difference in terms of making this a much more enjoyable experience. Another is you get what you pay for. You're in an arena of 70,000 people. You don't want obstructed view. You don't want to be behind the stage. I would take obstructed view and behind the stage if it meant those were the only tickets. It's better to be there than not. It's definitely quite an exhilarating experience, but sometimes you will notice, like the one thing I was able to have is that contrast between night one and night two. So for context, night one, I was able to get a pre-sale. Night two, I had to buy from a third party because night two was sold out so quickly. The night one tickets were significantly better. Significantly more enjoyable if it wasn't for the fact that it was frigid outside in terms of being able to enjoy the spectacle in front of me. Whereas night two, if I stayed in my seat, I would have driven myself insane. And I found myself going to central areas that were less populated on the staircases to sit down and watch the event. Not quite fire hazard heavy, but you got 50 people on a staircase that holds a few thousand. It's not so bad, but that helped make the night two much more enjoyable. And the weather happened to be in our favor on night two. So, those are the little things that I would notice. I think a big thing, if I'm looking at my wife who came to the event, would be it probably helps to have some context as to what's going on. People buy this event at this time in history, months and months and months and months in advance before a card is ever announced. I actually am a massive CM Punk fan, and I think Seth Rollins is one of the best performers in the world. I had this idea that CM Punk and Seth Rollins would be the night one main event. I know that Seth Rollins has always wanted a main event, and I know it was a big thing for CM Punk, and I was pretty sure that Cody and Roman's story was going ahead. So I jumped the shark, and I bought better seats for night one. It didn't work out as planned, but I think that had there not been the injury, you could probably make a case that was the direction at least the story was going. But regardless, I ended up getting a pretty solid 40-plus minute main event with one of the largest characters in the history of the company. My poor wife, on the other hand, was like, "Who's that? What's happening?" And I think that there's a lot of the casual audience that maybe Vince Russo tends to reference from time to time, who are not going to be plugged into every story. And I think a good example of not being plugged into every story would have been the exceptional triple threat match for the United States title, or the Intercontinental Championship match that really only came to fruition as a story a couple of weeks ahead of the pay-per-view, both of which were standout performances for the night. Sami Zayn versus Gunther was one of the best matches I've ever seen in person in terms of its execution. But I did notice that although there's people who are obviously very big Sami Zayn fans, like myself, and a lot of people who are probably very invested in this, it was difficult to keep that investment for some of the audience who were noticeably either waiting for what was to come next or just weren't interested in a story that didn't have the background that obviously a lot of the other matches leading into the pay-per-view did. So a couple pieces in pacing. My biggest recommendation would be, if you want to be a part of this, is that you've got to buy your tickets early. And you've also got to prepare to be disappointed. We've seen people who get very tribal at these events, and I always think that's kind of foolish. It's no place for your high heels. Nobody cares how pretty you look. I always get a kick out of guys who show up with their title belts. I'm all for it. I love the fandom. I've got a couple of those belts hanging on my wall. I think they're gorgeous. I appreciate wanting to have that memorabilia, but if you're going to carry it to the arena, I'm going to challenge you to a fight for it, because, my opinion, that's how this works. If you're going to carry a title belt, then be prepared to defend it. Otherwise, I would say be prepared to spend a lot of money, a lot more money than I think any of us are aware of. There's a reason why these are the highest grossing pay-per-view and PLE events of all time. And that is that, you can make an argument that for my wife and I to go to this event, and we don't come from a lot of money, by doubling your revenue because you're having 2 nights of an event, and then to get any type of seat that's reasonable in an arena that size, you're spending more than you realize. And that's just on the first part. That doesn't include literally, I think there was a Dr. Dre Snoop Dogg Gin and Juice, which was $18.95 American. Jesus. You have 2 of those, you've spent $40, $40 American. For me, we're looking at almost $60 to have a drink, right? So a lot of positives. I think that it's really easy to get caught up in the emotion. I thought it was cool they had sign-making stations, and they were really encouraging that fandom, encouraging people to get involved. There's really nothing like seeing, LA Knight's explosive response. I thought it was starting to mute. I was probably thinking maybe it was getting stale. I was wrong. He gets a response unlike anyone other than Dominic Mysterio. I'd say the two of them get the biggest responses of the night that are the least divided. In a match with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, you're going to have division because there's still an audience that loves the Tribal Chief. There's going to be people who are pro The Rock, who are cheering for Seth Rollins, who actually are still cheering for, Drew McIntyre. But no doubt everyone hated Dominic Mysterio and everyone loved LA Knight. And those moments specifically were pretty cool to be a part of. The audience gets into it. If you're easily annoyed by catchphrases, I heard yeet about 700,000 times in an afternoon, and it ended up being the worst match on the bill. Sometimes there is a toxic element to professional wrestling fans, especially when they drink a lot. But then again, I've been that guy, so I'm not judging. It's more just a buyer beware market that way. Overall, the event was magic. It was magic, man. I was a kid again. Some of these matches were outstanding. The presentation was spectacular. Lil Wayne, I didn't quite understand. I think he rapped for 48 seconds. That didn't feel like the live experience I was expecting. Motionless in White, on the other hand, were spectacular. The pageantry is unlike anything I've ever seen. And I did get a kick out of a few guys I was standing next to going, "Oh my God, is that Muhammad Ali on stage?" And it was Thunderbolt Patterson. And I thought, I got humor out of those moments. But for the most part, I would go again. And to be honest, we ran into some other fellow Newfoundlanders there, which was amazing. For context, our island is like 500,000 people. And our capital city, of course, would be much smaller than that. And we managed to run into other people we had never met before from St. John's. And we're already thinking about what it's going to look like if they end up going out to Viking land there in Minnesota next year. It definitely is a contagious experience. I'll give it that.
If there was ever a king of Canada, my vote would be for Leigh Bursey. Leigh, that was an excellent assessment of WrestleMania. You were able to give us some information about your take on the matches, but also the atmosphere, the food in Philadelphia, the whole 9 yards, which I love. And that's exactly why you had to be a part of this 8th year anniversary special for the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast. Leigh, how can folks keep up with you, man, and get more of your awesome takes?
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm on all social platforms, and you'll get a mix when, as you mentioned in the last episode, you're going to get a mix of takes with me. Monday night might be dominated by Rob, but, there's going to be a lot of federal housing announcements and talking about poverty prevention. I'm on X, Twitter there at LEIGHBURSEY. On Instagram, it's reversed. It's at Bursey Leigh, BURSEYLEIGH. I'm Leigh Zachary Bursey on Facebook. I also have some music out there somewhere. I'd love to connect and make friends. And, I'd love to come back and talk about how a slow burn story, how Maxine Dupree is starting to impress people, and they turned it into a character angle. I don't know who predicted that. Who was it? That was me, Duke. That was me. I predicted that. Maybe we'll have to come back on and discuss a few more matters sometime soon. In the meantime, brother, congratulations. 8 years. That's awesome.
Till next time, be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. Take it away, Tony Schiavone.
This is Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Rasslin.